and carry on with the wiring. I'm not gonna film what I'm doing while I'm doing it because it's just too hard to film and do, especially when I'm crunched up under here. But got the fuse panel mounted. The wiring that goes up into the engine bay is routed. That's the there's the taillight wiring. That's gonna get routed through this channel here. This curve, it's yuck, but whatever. So you have to route wires to the dimmer switch in the floor. I'm gonna pick those out of the harness here, pop them through the floor too, or through the firewall there. It's just a short drop down. My next step though is wiring up the starter. So I'm gonna put this thing up on ramps, which isn't gonna be fun to jack it up and pop ramps up under the front wheels and get that all set up so I can wire up the starter. Went and bought myself bought a few things yesterday. Got my local Canadian Tire. Got myself some bits and bobs, some loom. Let's use the cheap plastic stuff. I was gonna, the level you go with should match the car. This car is plastic loom from Canadian Tire level. And I got myself a heat gun. All that stuff that I'll use again and again, so it's not a big deal. The workbench is out of control again. Tie wraps. Of course, gonna need lots of them. Put these up out of the way. Drill bits. And I went and bought a decent set of crimpers. I hate those combo crimper stripper deals. They just don't crimp properly, so decent crimpers are worth every penny. I'm going to be doing lots of it. I have a push button. That's for my horn, actually. I got a horn button. I actually put this on the bottom of the column. Did that 4 years ago on another car I had. It actually made it more convenient than reaching up under the dash and you don't even see it. Just stick that on the bottom of the steering column. Because I broke the steering wheel getting it off. Or it was already broke and epoxied together, so I'm going to put a Grant wheel on that I have. A couple of vintage Grant wheels in the back there, hanging up. The bigger one will go on. I like the looks of them anyway. To me, it's not really a hot rod unless it's got one of those wheels. And I got some ring terminals and stuff. But that's my random stuff. The actual kit actually came with a bunch of connectors. My fusible links and some shrink wrap and stuff comes in this box. For the money, this is a very, very good kit. That's for like a GM style column, I believe. Ignition switch. Even comes with the alternator wire. This here is for the high beam dimmer. So I don't know. See, that may plug in. Or is this for the column style dimmer. I'll have to figure it out. It's all in the instructions. And some other terminal clips, I think, for the GM column. Anyway, grab the floor jack this sucker up. Okay, so next step will be wiring up this distributor, and between the haywire directions and this, because it's electronic ignition, I do not need a ballast resistor. I can go just straight to the coil. The wire's all marked. But when you're doing one of these kits, it's going to depend on what your components are. Like yesterday, I also wired the alternator. They do give instructions for different types of alternators, even Ford and Chrysler. So even though the harness is all color-coded GM, they tell you how to hook them up. Same with the starters. So, and also too with my starter, as far as I know, I don't need a wire going to the ignition side of the solenoid, because I'll have this coming off straight to the coil. So I should be good, because it's basically an HEI. It's an electronic ignition, not a points ignition. You have that. I wonder what, I can't remember. They have the ignition side on the solenoid. They interrupt something when you're turning the key, so you don't actually get voltage to your coil unless you have that with a point style ignition. It's just so points don't have constant power, otherwise you'll burn them up. So something like that. I can't remember. I used to remember. I used to know, but someone could correct me on that, but I'm just following the diagrams. So all I did was look online, because that's what the car has in it. It's got an MSD Pro Billet, like standalone style distributor. So I believe they have an HEI module inside. Be similar if you've got an electronic ignition from Pertronics or anything. Even an HEI, which is even easier. You just run this wire straight to the one side of the HEI. But yeah, I just looked this up online, and boom, there was the diagram. It's from MSD's actual page. I think they're owned by Holley now. They all have good information. So, shouldn't be too hard. Not too far from actually being able to turn a key and have this thing run again finally, instead of having to use jumper wires and craziness. But it was a pain in the ass yesterday, because I had to take the starter out, because the one stud on the side of the solenoid, the one that's labeled S, the start, the nut on it would go on so far and then just spin. So the threads are stripped down in that area. That could have been part of my problem. So I had to take the starter out to get the nut to back out, because it was just spinning either way. It didn't matter. I had to wedge a screwdriver in there. So all I did was put a washer in behind to kind of space it out so that the nut can actually tighten down, because I wasn't going to change a whole solenoid just because of a little bit of goober threads. But I've found that on these solenoids lately, well, not even lately, just even the last 20 years, that it's really easy to strip the threads. The nuts don't fit nice. You're trying to get the nuts back on. They go on cockeyed, and especially when you're doing this all in the car, it's a real pain. So I left my wires long enough that I could hook the wires up while it was laying on the ground, and then I just stuffed the starter in, and then tie wrap the wires up. That way, if I do have to change the starter again, I just clip the wires, then I can, or clip the tie wrap, and then I can drop the starter out, and then undo those when they're on the ground. Just the way that everything's situated, the exhaust manifold, and the style, it's old style, so it's laid out just like an old Tri-5 Chevy, where the starter actually bolts into the bell housing, and you've got the trans mounts actually go off the bell housing, and the motor has front mounts on it. Like, all that type of stuff is factory. A lot of guys convert them, but not on this car. It wasn't done, and it just makes everything tight in there, because now instead of the bolts going straight up into the block, they're horizontal, and you can't get a socket on 2 out of the 3 of them. So it's just lovely, and there's no room to swing a box and wrench, so it was a bit of a struggle. We got her out and got it back in. It would have been easier to change the transmission, honestly. Anyway, I'm going to carry on, and hopefully we'll be able to see it fire shortly. Okay, some progress. A nightmare yesterday, but I got the wiring run down there. Everything on these pre-made harnesses, and everything is harnessed in groups. So this is like engine wiring harness. So this has like tack wire, it's got electric choke wire, it's got electric fan wire. Like, this kit's a pretty deluxe kit. It had everything. It had power windows, you name it. So none of which I have. But I bought the big kit because, well, it's mild custom. I may shave the door handles, and then I can use the power door lock circuit for door poppers. There's power window circuits there. There's air AC, which this car is really sweet on road trips, so it may see AC in the future. It would be nice to make it great for road trips. I do want to drive it to California and go to the West Coast Customs Show in Santa Maria. It'd be nice to have AC when you're, especially when you're cruising through the desert. So yeah, so this is the engine harness. So see, it's got oil pressure sender switch, so if you have an idiot light, we'll do that. This tan one is for the electric choke, which this doesn't have. It's got the temperature pot dealie there. CRC electric fan signal. See that? This one here is coolant temp. Which I do have. I just gotta figure out where it is. The temp sensor for that. And here's somewhere. What's in the back of the motor? I do have a temp gauge. It might be mechanical as well. So yeah. So that's all. So I'm not going to be using them. So I actually cut the tie wraps out of the harness. Then what I do have is for the white wire is your tack, and this is like GMHEI ballast resistor. So if you're using points, you're going to need a ballast resistor. This is an MSD setup. It's not points. It's ready to run pro billet distributor with a blaster coil. So I just looked up the drawings, so I get the wiring code right, and we're good. So that's my next step. I'm gonna wire that up. Oh, I did. Not only did I wire the starter, I also wired the alternator. The sun's washing us out here. Yeah. So you got the brown. It's got your alternator exciter wire. Which, I mean, in the past when I've done older cars and put an alternator on them, all I do is jump these two together, because this is a 12 volt signal. So saying you got battery voltage, it tells the regulator basically, yeah, okay, because it's an internal regulator. So it says, yes, there's a battery connected, put out voltage basically is what it's doing. If it doesn't see anything, it's not going to put any voltage out. So that could be a condition of undercharged, overcharged battery, whatever, failed connection. And then you get the stud back here. I hate these friggin' rubber boots. I put it on two separate, instead of putting them under the same crimp and the same ring terminal. I like to have them separate, and I have it in the boot, but the boot just won't fit over top, or whatever. I don't know why I put the boot on. Now I ran the wires along through here. That's where they ran before. There's the extra I talked about, the wires going down on the starter. That way I can just drop it down and set it on the ground. Because it is not easy to get out in there between the exhaust manifold, the exhaust that runs under there. You just can't reach it. You lean in from the top, and then when you do get your arm in there, you can't see what you're doing. So anyway, so my next step, yes, is to wire up the ignition here. At that point, I should actually be able to hook up my ignition key and start this. That's my goal at the end of today. Okay, so I pulled a bunch of them back. So what I have back is choke, electric fan, and oil pressure sensor. This green one here is for the temp sensor. So it's plugged in, coil's all hooked up, alternator's all hooked up, starter's all hooked up. And really I should be able to hook up the ignition switch and fire this up. I think I need that victory, so I think that's my next step. Do that, and then I can just go on to wiring all the lights. Then I'm basically done. I gotta do the dash lights too. Dash lights are important. Headlights, taillights. It all takes time. And it's been, our spring was so miserable, cold, and now it's just miserable, stinking hot. It's like the switch got flipped. Instant. So I took a little bit of a break here for about an hour because the sun was directly overhead and it was just cooking me. But I'm good now. I'm gonna get back on her. But I do have loom to put on all this, but I'm gonna leave it all exposed for the moment, just to, in case I have to troubleshoot anything. So I'll put loom on after, once I'm happy. So for now, I'm just gonna roll up those extras and tuck them back here, tie wrap them down there. But I'm gonna show you a trick for tie wraps. Instead of cutting them off, what you do is you grab, I can't do it one hand, but you grab the end with pliers or whatever. Grab the end here, and instead of cutting, you twist like this. You twist it till it snaps off. That way it's not left with a sharp edge. So I just can't do both right now. Hold the filming with my phone, hold the phone and twist this at the same time. No. So I'll do it and show you how it snaps off. There, see? The end, and it's not sharp where it's gonna cut you like it would if you cut it. That's what I do. Okay. hook things up temporarily here. That's the neutral safety I jumped together. The ignition switch hooked up. It actually has the plug-in right there. But it mounts on the dash. They give you this pigtail so you can either plug it into a column with that connector or put it in dash. There's a lot of excess, so I basically cut it in half. I'm still gonna have lots. That's the hardest thing about this. I hit the button there with my thumb. That's the hardest thing about this kit, is to judge what length you're gonna need, because you gotta put terminals on and whatnot. But I'm gonna hook up the battery and see if she'll roll over. Everything else should be safe, so because nothing else is bare except for these that go either into the column. They give you a couple different connectors for them to plug into. It's for your signal switches, but I've got one of these aftermarket Dominion column switches. Because the guts of this column long ago been foobarred, so that's what I'm doing. Plug the battery in and hopefully I don't burn it down to the ground. Okay, this is gonna be tricky. Oops. Let's see. I got proppies up here. Oh, look at the shifter boot. Got proppy up. And of course the key to already. Should just get my tripod. Try this out. Okay, I think I got it. Here we go. Let's see if it turns over. Oh, sweet. Sweet, sweet, sweet. Wonder if it'll start and run. Pops the old gas here. Ugh. This is super, super awkward. Facing uphill too. Fuel, I can smell it. Doesn't sound like there's any spark. What the F? Oh well, at least it turns over. Okay, figured out what I did. What I didn't do was hook up the ground for the distributor, the MSD. Which is a tiny little ground wire. I hooked up the tack. I just hooked up the ground now, so it should fire. But what I'm actually going to do is put the ignition switch in a spot in the dash so it's easier to turn over. I'll be right back as soon as that's done. Okay, let's try this again. Oh, she wants to run. From a key. With a bunch of goofy jumpers. Now, shut up. Shit. Okay. Something in that ignition switch. Because I just showed you as the ground and everything else while I was running around. And I nicked my wires for my lighting harness, nicked the fan. Probably why I should have waited. Let's see. Oh, I got the battery disconnected. Okay, well, I know it runs and starts. That's the victory for today. Let's see what I buggered up. Here, sucking it in. Thought for sure it was nicking it. Well, I'll look this over and see what I did.